Alright, so useEffect. Let's see how useEffect works and why we need to use it in our React app. We have our counter app that we did last time in the useState video. And we have a count that's being displayed and two buttons that are going to change the count. Alright, so pretty simple app. Nothing too complicated. Now, let's say I want to console log that this app is running, but I want this part of the code to be ran only once. Alright, so I want this console log to be ran only once. When I reload the app, see it's logging this only once, but if I change the state, you see it's getting ran again. It's ran, this console log is being ran 20 times. It's being ran every time I change my state, and I don't want that. I want it to be ran only at the beginning. And this is when useEffect comes into play. useEffect is used to call stuff less often and to have a better cleanup. So let's try that. We're gonna import useEffect and we're gonna say useEffect. We're gonna give it a function and we're gonna give it an array. Now this array here is called the dependency array. The dependency array is used to watch for stuff. So if I put a counter here, it's gonna watch this counter value and it's gonna call this part, this block of code, anything here, when this counter changes. Alright, so in our example we want this app is running to be called only once, and that's why we're gonna be using an empty dependency array. So now when we go to our app, we reload, the app is running, and when we change our state, you see the app is not getting, this part of the code is not getting called multiple times. Now, this is the most basic use of useEffect. Let's say we want to display our counter each time it's getting changed. We're gonna do the same thing, but now inside our useEffect, we're gonna place in counter and we're gonna display. Alright, counter. Now when we go to our app, that's semicolon. Okay, when we go to our app and we change our number, our state of the count, you see it's getting logged all the time. Meanwhile, this app is running, is still only getting called once. And that's the main part about useEffect. We control the amount of calls that are going to be needed. Now, you can complicate this logic even more. You can say if counter mod 2 is equal to 0, we're going to display counter is even. So we're going to check if counter mod 2 is equal to 0. We're going to check if it's even. If it is, we're going to say it's even. We reload the page. It didn't render, you see? When we go to 2, it renders. When we go to 3, it doesn't render. When we go to 4, it renders. So we can have our custom logic here. We can do whatever we want. And it's gonna be ran whenever the value in our dependency array changes. Now, these are some pretty good examples, but in real life, when you're making your app, most of the time you're gonna be using this, right? useEffect, and we're gonna give it again a function and an empty dependency array, and now you're gonna be fetching some stuff, right? You want to fetch stuff at the beginning, at the mounting of your component, and you don't want it to be called again because it's stupid. It's stupid to make 50 API calls because it's just inefficient. It's also putting a strain on the server, and that's why you're going to be using an empty array, empty dependency array to fetch some stuff. So for example, you're going to say fetch some stuff, and you're going to say set users is equal to the stuff you got from your API. All right, so this is the real world example of useEffect that you're going to be using. Now you can also make it async. We're going to say you have an empty array here, empty parentheses, you're going to give it a function and you're going to execute it. And this is basically async inside of useEffect because you cannot do this. It's impossible to do this. All right, So you're going to be calling async like this. This is the common use case of useEffect. And there are some constraints with useEffect. For example, you cannot do this. If something, then do something. If true, then, and then you can call useEffect. This is impossible, all right? Because it says React hook useEffect is called conditionally. You cannot call useEffect conditionally. So avoid this and use it like this, all right? Now, there is one more thing about useEffect, and it's called the cleanup. So when I run useEffect like this with code completion, it gives me the cleanup part here. And this cleanup part is gonna, this block of code here, you can say whatever, is gonna be ran only when the component is unmounted, meaning when it doesn't exist anymore, when it's not needed anymore. Now, let's give an example of this. We can create a component that says display number.js. We're gonna give it props, but instead of props, I'm just gonna destructure this. All right, and we're gonna display it here, count. Now, let's say we want to keep track of when this component mounts and unmounts. All right, so we're going to be calling useEffect. We're going to have this as empty dependency array, and we're going to say console.log display number unmounted. And at the beginning, when it mounts, we want to say display number mounted. And this is our entire component. Now, let's place it in here. So we're gonna say button change display number visibility, and we're gonna give it an on click. And now we need something to change the visibility of our component, so we're gonna say give it a state of visible and set visible. We're gonna give use state, we're gonna give it initial value of false, and now change set visible is gonna be to exclamation mark visible, which means if this visible is true, it's going to be false. If it's false, it's going to be true, and so on. And now that we set up this function, we can display our component display number. So we're going to say if visible is true, and we're going to say display number, and we're going to give it a count of counter times 2. And if it's not, we're going to say null. Now it complains here that display number is not defined, which means we need to import it. So we can display number from display number. All right. Now, if visible, if this state here, visible, is true, then we're going to display our component. And if visible is false, we're going to display null. All right. Now, when we go to our app, you see counter is even. Everything still works. But if we change the visibility, it says display number mounted. And here it is. All right. Here it is. It's changing. Now, if we don't want display number to work anymore, we're going to click here, click this button, and it says display number unmounted, which means it doesn't exist anymore, and the cleanup function in display number here is getting called. And that's basically why you need the cleanup function, to make your code cleaner and to not have something that should exist when it shouldn't. And that's basically useEffect.